So when I time this, it won't be very long. Take a breath. It's really an honor to stand here before you, and like the others before me, I just want to acknowledge that the work we do at Sound Discipline is really the result of many people collaborating and learning and continuing to dream the dream of growing a community woven together across class, across culture, across race, by bonds of deep mutual respect, where people young and old can do the right thing even when no one's looking. There's an old African proverb, this will be another one for the night. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I owe deep gratitude to all my co-travelers on this journey, many of whom are here tonight. And you know, and I know, it's only together that we can make this work happen. I owe a special gratitude to the members of my family who are here, my sister and my mom, and also to Terry Chadley, who concocted this dream with me about 15, almost 16 years ago. We began dreaming together. We'll do this small step by small step. What I want to do tonight is share a bit of my own story with you, and then I want to share a story of the work we do, what it looks like, what it tastes like, so you can get a sense of how powerful it can be. I want to really inspire you to co-dream with us, because the more people who can do this, the more people who can pick up starfish off the beach, the better our community will be. I'm often asked how it was that I left the practice of family medicine to do this work. And there are really two parts to that, to the answer. The first is that my work hasn't changed. That you can really argue that the biggest threat to the network of our community, the connection in our community, is the silent epidemic of intra-family violence. And that's been well documented now by Vince Folletti and his co-workers at the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. So in many ways, I still am a physician. It's just that the patient has changed. The other answer is a little more obscure. You know, I love practicing family medicine. I love delivering babies. I love listening to stories and sitting at the feet of the hundreds of teachers, my patients, who came to me and taught me about life, about suffering, about hope, and about compassion. It just wasn't the work I was exactly meant to do. And my awareness of this grew gradually until it wasn't gradual anymore. And suddenly it felt like I had one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat, and the boat was leaving. And I had to jump. So I did. And in 1996, I landed in a world of working with parents and with schools and communities suffering from a different kind of dis-ease. So why do I like the work I do now? I spend a lot of time working with school staff and parents so they can lead the life they lead with courage and with connection. So they can respond to and meet the needs of the situation and still maintain dignity for themselves and for the community that they're working with. They can still have a grip on the necessary order, and they can still convey the message of caring. What I'm about to tell you is a story from a school that we worked with. And it was shared by a resource room teacher. I have permission to share it, and just for the sake of the people involved, I've changed the names. So Gina is a Native American first grader. She did not get dealt an easy hand coming into this life. Her mother was born with fetal alcohol syndrome, so you can imagine what her family was like, and will witness at a very young age of her own mother's brutal murder. She was then adopted into a family in Seattle who cared for her and, they had a nice time together. And when Gina was born, Gina's mom did pretty well until Gina became a toddler, and then the mom became overwhelmed and she left. So Gina was placed in foster care for about 4 months. And eventually she ended up being adopted by the same family that had adopted her mom. Like many children who've had traumatic experiences, Gina has not had an easy time in school. Her teachers think she's bright, and she's sort of wise beyond her years in some ways, but she doesn't have good communication skills, she's not reading at grade level, and she doesn't self-regulate well. And you know what that means? That means she's disruptive. unpredictably and difficultly disruptive. She spends most of her time in a regular first grade classroom, but she spends about an hour a day in the resource room to get some extra help. So on this particular February day, this happened just last month, she had kind of a rough morning, got to lunch, stood in line, put some grapes on her plate, put some milk on her tray, and then went to check out. And it just so happened that that particular day there was a substitute lunch lady. And the substitute lunch lady didn't know Gina. She said, Gina, you can't go sit down yet. You need 4 items on your plate. That was too much. Gina lost it. She started kicking the lunch lady. She dropped to the floor. She pushed on the cart. She started to unplug the computer and was screaming the whole time. So you can imagine what the scene looks like. Lucky for Gina, the resource room teacher happened to be walking by. So you can just picture the scene. The resource teacher drops down, tries to connect with Gina, no go. Screaming at the top of her lungs, right? The principal happens to walk by, realizes the situation's out of hand, picks Gina up. He and the resource room teacher and Gina all go to the resource room, at which point he leaves, so now there's the resource room teacher and Gina screaming at the top of her lungs. Now they've worked together before. And after a little bit, she started to calm down, and suddenly she grabs her throat and she says, I can't breathe, we have to go outside. Now this kid's a runner, by which I mean it tends to kind of escape when it gets frightened, runs, and the teacher was a little concerned, Mrs. M is the teacher, that Gina was going to escape. So she says, Gina, I'm glad to go outside with you if you'll agree to hold my hand. Gina agrees, so out they go. They walk outside for a little bit, and walking's good for kids who are overwhelmed like this. And she gradually calms down, and they end up by the wall. And Gina says, I feel better now. Now I can breathe, and I know I'm not going to die. Teacher's a little overwhelmed, and they just sit there by the wall for a little bit. And Gina's first grade teacher comes over, and she says, Gina, I know you've had a tough day. And in the past, she's actually getting better, but she's had tough days before and had to go home. She says, if you need to go home, it's okay with me, but we would love to have you in school this afternoon. We'd miss you if you went, but you need to know that either way is okay with me. I love you. At which point Gina looks back at her teacher and says, I love you too. Surprised all of them. So Mrs. M, the resource room teacher, and Gina stand by the wall just for a little bit, cool down a little bit more, and Gina says, I'm going back to class. Kind of cool, huh? So, gotta find my place here. In our experience, 100% of the students who have earned frequent flyer miles to the principal's office have experienced trauma of some kind. They're like Gina. Trauma changes how people learn. It changes their brain. Trauma leaves scars. Sometimes multi-generational scars, extending their long, dark fingers into the future. The stories are devastating. They're heartbreaking. Young people are often the victims of their society's or their family's disrupted history. It's a heritage they are unwittingly likely to transmit to their own children. With the wrong diagnosis comes the wrong remedy. Stricter and stricter punitive actions are not the answer here. They have not worked, and they will not work in the future. They will not heal our hidden wounds. And we know enough to offer a different prescription. We know that one of the main factors of resilience against trauma is the deep belief that you matter to another human being, that you are not alone. I think we've heard that before tonight. Like Mrs. M and Gina and her teachers, we know how to gradually help young people develop the sense that they matter. We know how to teach them to self-regulate and to grow their skills and to grow the skills to join their community in a socially useful way. We know that the epidemic of social and interfamily violence can be interrupted, but it's going to take all of us. No one organization can administer this cure. And I'm hoping that you will join me in expanding the communities of resilience and interrupting the cycle of violence. It will take a village. Individually, we can get better at conveying the message, you matter to me, to those we love. As communities, we can have courageous conversations to reweave the fabric of our interconnectedness. As institutions, we can and we must hone our skills and systems to make room for the Ginas of the world, who, with support, can grow and redevelop their ability to self-regulate and to be valuable contributors to our shared future. I have one more story about Gina, and this just happened about a week and a half ago. She was talking to Mrs. M in the resource room one day, and she said, "Mrs. M, we're getting a lot better at